who I haven't had a chance to meet before on one of the sessions who I've done. My name is Bill Fanning. I'm with the team here at Talk, and really excited that you're here. Today's conversation was something that I wanted to have more of a discussion as a group to talk about where we think we need to focus in terms of technologies and training areas that are going to become important as we start to incorporate different models of talent acquisition, whether that be fully functioning chatbots, whether that be different types of recruiting models, different ways of sourcing. And I'm really curious to just get everyone's collective thoughts in that area. And in this discussion, I think it'll be helpful for everyone to share. So I'm excited about that. As always, if you can turn your camera on, that'd be awesome. If you can't, I fully understand, but not a problem. It's always great to be able to see everyone. So I appreciate that. And we'll get underway. And so I will say that I do not have as much of a PowerPoint put together as I did, and I'm blaming my wife's cat. And here's why. It tipped over my cup of coffee this morning across my desk and computer. And it's still alive, which is good. There was a moment there it was touch and go, but when I closed my computer, the PowerPoint that I had didn't save all the way. So I only have a couple slides, which is good actually, because I'd rather talk rather than present. So I'm excited to go through that. I just wanted to mention that we are going to RecFest in September, and really excited if any of you are in that area or want to go. We are going to be putting a sale up on price on tickets soon. They're offering us a 20% discount. We've been given a couple free tickets. We will have a booth there for people to come by and new people to learn about Talk. I like RecFest because it's a really interesting or newer way to conduct an event because it's outdoors and it's more like a carnival or a festival. That being said, it did not rain last year. I'm hoping for the same type of turnout this year, but I'm not sure what we're going to do if it rains. So that'll be a fun turn of events if it does. And then we are putting a partnership together and going to Transform next year as well. I just want to remind everyone, if as you're planning out potential events for 2025, I found that one to be a great event. And if that's of interest, we'll also be able to extend some opportunity to go at a discount and potentially some additional benefits of us being there. The only thing I wanted to mention is we have some really cool discussions coming up in the next couple weeks. One of the ones that I'm excited for next week is neurodiversity in the workplace. This is a conversation to me that's near and dear. And the whole genesis of this came from my 14-year-old's discussion at camp. So my 14-year-old is on the spectrum, and she is not able very often to have serious conversations and look you in the eye. When she does conversation, she needs to fiddle with her fingers or look down. And the person who runs the camp that she's a counselor at got very mad at her for not paying attention. And it made me sit back and start thinking about, how does that happen in an interview process? How do we create an environment where somebody with that type of background is seen as by a hiring manager or a recruiter as not being aloof or not paying attention, which is the situation that happened last week. So I invited a friend of mine that's really knowledgeable in this area to have a discussion around that. And I'm excited to go down that, to talk about that, because it's really interesting. Personally for me, but just generally in the hiring process, because we really need to create that inclusive process. Then we have Ben Eubanks from Lighthouse Advisors coming to talk to us about data that he's captured. They do a phenomenal job there. And then we have Chad and Cheese coming, if anyone's familiar with that podcast. They're coming to join us to talk about the uses of generative AI. What I think will be phenomenal about that, I'd encourage you to attend if you can, is they have great perspective on what's happening in the market with different vendors and different advancements because of their vantage point of seeing all the things that are happening by the different vendors in the market. So great opportunity to ask questions and gain some valuable insights. So finally, and this is the end of my slides, what I wanted to talk about was the technologies and training areas needed for success in 2025 and beyond. So I'm just going to shut this off. Hang on one sec. There we go. And really what I was thinking about in this is we are, for me, it feels like, and I think mathematically it proved to be true, we're operating in a marketplace or a market that has more vendors in it than we've ever had before. There are more boutique niche solution providers out there that offer really interesting solutions. Some I see as solutions, some as I almost see as like features that need to be integrated with a bigger system. On top of that, we have a lot of new sourcing technologies that are coming into the marketplace. We have a lot of new tools that are being offered. The interesting thing for me, just coming from a recruitment background, is that it's honestly, I think job boards are not as popular as they used to be. I certainly know we all love Indeed, so let's just put that on the table. They're our favorite. Outside of that, I'm kidding, by the way. But outside of that, I think there's a lot of opportunity for learning from one another in terms of that. So I'm just curious, before we get started, as you guys look at the market, and you can drop your answer into chat, are there new areas in terms of technology or areas that you think you need to focus on in terms of training as you look at next year? Because I think from the conversations I'm having and what I'm seeing seems to be going down that path. But I'm curious how all of you see that, and if that's something that is an area that you're thinking about in terms of what do we need to be successful for next year.
Hi, Bill. I can get started.
Awesome.
For all of those, just wanted to kind of make a brief introduction. Padma, I'm the talent acquisition part of the talent TA team at Travere Therapeutics. And one of the areas that we're looking to focus on is really on the AI front, right? How do we incorporate, I'm sure that's a discussion we're all having, right, in some form or the other, in terms of our recruiting practices there, and how can our teams are not getting bigger in terms of the TA teams, right? We're not getting bigger, but there's just a lot more work going on. And so how do we get smarter, right, in the ways that we work? So I think part of it is folding in AI into our day-to-day, whether it be on the interview scheduling, right? How do we get the notes in order? So some of those forms. And then the other portion, I will say, the second part is really the pipeline building, right? So sourcing talent, being able to be ready in terms of when of course the floodgates open, right? So I think it's really that we're looking to focus on.
Yeah, that's great feedback. And I think that is very, very much in line with what I'm seeing in a lot of the activity in the marketplace with the different vendors that are out there, and in some of the forums that I belong to in terms of what people are talking about. It's almost, from my personal opinion, just in terms of how I look at it, it seems to me that it's almost a foregone conclusion that AI needs to become more integrated into the processes, because I think you hit on an extremely important topic, which is over the last 36 to 48 months, going through the pandemic and some of the changes, talent acquisition teams have shrunk in size. We probably were bigger and now we're not. That being said, the volume of work that needs to happen by that team has started to go back up, but the team's not increasing. So AI is a perfect vehicle to be able to automate and do more with less. The question that I see people most talking about, who are the vendors and what are the processes, and how do we keep ourselves from getting in trouble? And trouble is a broader term, but I had dinner a little while ago with Keith Sunderling, who, if anyone knows him, he's with EEOC, and he's a very popular speaker, but I had a chance to sit across from him. And he talked extensively about the way the government is looking at AI. And so it's really interesting to me in terms of how we think about the vendors that we're going to bring into that process and checking the procedures and process that put around their AI engines, so we know we're doing something that's a positive step forward and not creating a challenge for ourselves. So AI is definitely on the table. Another one that I thought was really interesting is the sourcing. I think it's definitely an area where we're finding that people are harder to reach, or maybe not as proactive to respond. How, just a question to the audience, how valuable are some of the traditional sources of applicants, like the job boards that are out there? Like, and I'll use Indeed and LinkedIn because those seem to be the two biggest. We're in for a treat though, because between Monster and Career Builder, I think this is going to be just a firestorm of success. So I'm kidding, but I was curious, how are we working with them, and are you still seeing success from them as much as you used to?
Bill, I think I'll hop in here. Padma, thanks for starting the conversation. For those who are unfamiliar, I'm Ellie Ryham. I'm Talent Acquisition and Workforce Development for MMR Construction. We are an electrical construction company, and I love when we speak about AI because it's like bringing the dinosaurs to now. So we speak of Indeed, and sourcing for us and for next year is a major issue for me. Up until traditionally and up until I joined in this role, and the fact that we actually started talent acquisition and workforce development, incredibly new. I'm talking months new for a construction company. Traditionally, it has been using those sourcing platforms like Indeed with almost zero success. So, one of my biggest challenges is finding ways to source human labor, craft personnel, who are not using AI, who are not using much technology. In fact, so far it has been word of mouth. Your superintendent, your foreman comes in, they know a person out in Texas, they're going to call them, who do you know? And that's how it's happening. Of 30 people that I may hire or place in a job, almost 20 of them will not have the skills they needed to come on board. Cost, time, and energy going into hiring, but yielding no results, will not stay long term. Finding that, how do I build loyalty to the brand? Because these are people working, transitioning from job to job. So for me, I face these challenges. And as much as I would love to find a place for AI in my processes, one of my biggest challenges is, where do I place AI in my processes, and how, like Padma, on the pipeline, how do I have my information reach the right people? And those are some of the challenges I'm thinking about for 2025.
No, I definitely, I think that's a really interesting challenge. I always think of, in the construction, I consider, my brain puts them in a category which I call skilled labor, meaning high skill, not traditional in terms of a LinkedIn user, but very skilled in what they do in their industry. And I'm thinking about people who, simple terms, they're welders, they're being able to go out and do certain tools, drive certain vehicles, do things like that. And that is challenging. Reaching them is very challenging. And
Licensed electricians with 10 years in the
yeah,
field
Yeah.
are incredibly skilled, incredibly hard to come by, but they are not on LinkedIn. It's
no,
fine if I'm looking for my staff, I'm looking for my project engineers, for my project managers, my construction managers, but that's not the bread and butter. I have 2,000 people out in the field and 30 people in the staff positions. So how am I going to successfully find these people? And then it's not a matter of finding them. How do I successfully retain them?
Yeah.
yes,
Ellie, that's very interesting. Sorry, just wanted to chime in here because on one hand, you're seeing that as part of, the skilled labor, right? But they're not on LinkedIn. And I can tell you, in the biotech field, and happy to kind of see if my colleagues here agree with this, but MDs are not on LinkedIn, right? And so when we're looking for positions, especially we're in the rare disease space, right? And so it's very niche, and we struggle with the same. Like, how do we get them engaged with our brand? Not Trivia is not known to many people, so how do we kind of get them to understand what we do first, even before we go into the next steps.
I agree. I'm Deirdre Jennings-Holton, and I lead talent acquisition for World Wildlife Fund. So we're a global nonprofit conservation organization. And I've only been here for about 18 months. And, we deal with similar challenges. Coming in, one of the first things we ended up doing is severely decreasing our job posting budget because it wasn't yielding anything for us. It was making us weed through a bunch of unqualified resumes. And one of the things that I've seen and where we have started to move is candidate relationship management, so a pipeline management tool. We activated one within our applicant tracking system. You can get some that are kind of separate. And the nice thing about that is it's a way for when you get those word of mouth leads, there's a way now for a person to be able to just kind of get their information into our database. So, and where the automation is coming in, and we're just starting to work on some of this with the AI now, is in the contacts. Because, the first contact you make with somebody, you generally don't get anything. And so it's a couple of contacts. So you can actually use AI to do some of the automated contacting, like on a regular cadence to these people in your database. Encouraging them to update their resumes, to see, different things to start to build that engagement so that when you do have a position become available. We're just kind of in the beginning stages of it, but that's where I see us moving at WWF when it comes to this.
Now that's a great observation, and I do think that there is the relationship management aspect of managing that is becoming more and more important. I definitely think that there's certain validation in the market with the number of platforms that are now CRMs or ATS systems that are building the CRM on top of what they've already built. iCIMS is a great example.
Yeah, that's what we have.
Yeah, through somebody in the industry, I now know that iCIMS does more business on the CRM side than they do on their traditional ATS platform, almost like a 2-to-1, right? So I do understand that relationship, because there's only so many people out there, and you need to build those relationships because, one, you have a credible resource that you have a connectivity with, but the other thing that I've always felt is that everyone has a network. So if somebody is a skilled electrician, they're in a union. Mostly, that union has a lot of connectivity. And so they have a great network that they can bring into potentially opportunity by you being able to communicate to them that you have that opportunity and what you're looking for. So that's great. I am doing a horrible job of watching chat, so I apologize. I was busy listening, but I think that Appcast and using AI for nurturing is really important. Appcast has, I think, come a long way in their capabilities of doing that. Certainly with the acquisition of Baird, they brought a lot of knowledge and skill set into their environment to accelerate how they can help. Employer value proposition, brand, the marketing aspect, combined with the technology aspect that Appcast already had, that seems to me like they could be a very competitive solution going forward. And I do know from watching the different agencies that are out there, they've all moved from an agency standpoint, moved aggressively to integrate better with technology. Now, some are going out and building it themselves. Some are doing it through partnership. Baird became part of another organization, but it seems like they're all going in that direction to help take strategy and theory, which they're exceptional at, and bring it to practical application, which through technology terms.
Can I ask a follow-up, Deirdre? It sounded like, and maybe I'm not interpreting it right, but it sounds like Ellie, and I think a lot of us would probably have the same problem is, okay, there's this AI out there, but where do I fit it into my particular tech stack and process, right? So it sounds like you're looking at a lot of things and using things in certain spots. So how did you evaluate that? Did you just look at your own process and look at the pain points, or were you looking at the marketplace and relying on the vendors to tell you, hey, we're out here and we do this better?
No, absolutely not that. Then our budget would have been blown if we just went and listened to all the vendors. So I talked to some other people, so I'm a member of a couple of talent acquisition groups to hear what other people were doing. And I'm still ambivalent about using the AI for identifying candidates. As I think Bill, you had mentioned with the EEO, and Department of Labor has already put out guidelines that we're going to be liable if there's bias. But when it comes to the productivity, what I started hearing from some of my colleagues is that when it comes to generating these messages, it's a huge time saver. And the fact that you can set it and forget it, and just set it up to say, okay, I want you to reach out to these candidates every 6 to 8 weeks or something like that, was just great. And one of the things that I found, LinkedIn has now added some new AI into their messaging. And so
Yes.
what I will say is I for years have had like my own little library of magic sourcing messages that I would give to my teams that got a higher than normal response rate. And, they're just keywords. And now LinkedIn is giving that guidance. So when you're reaching out to a candidate with an in-mail or something like that, it'll now say, hey, listen, try this instead. It has a higher response rate. The other thing in LinkedIn, if you have the LinkedIn recruiter, you will be able to see, it'll use the AI to tell you that this person is more likely to respond to an in-mail. This person is very active right now. And so it gives you a lot more guidance, so you can be a lot more strategic and focused with your efforts, particularly like I think Padma and Ellie said, we have smaller talent acquisition teams. So we have to be a lot more resourceful.
Yep, that absolutely. One of the points that Cheryl had made was that I had mentioned they were shifting to more of social campaigns with AppCast, but they're also using a candidate engagement platform that Sense has developed tied to Workday. And I'm curious if anyone else is using any types of technologies like that, because it's a really powerful way to bring that message to potential applicants that are in your CRM to be able to provide information. I think Sense is one of the platforms out there that's done a great job of creating that at scale, but and using AI and making it automated. But is anyone else tackling it that way, using technologies for candidate engagement?
No, but as Deirdre was just talking, it occurred to me that with 3,000 people on different sites across 7 states, I normally make site visits, but this is a great way to implement AI in terms of just saying, hey, you okay? Just checking in, hope everything's going okay on site. So it just triggered some thought processes. So thanks, Deirdre.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very cool. And Ellie, one thing to potentially look at, there is a company out there, and I would just say consider it. I don't know if they're a solution. It's called This Way Global, and they're an AI sourcing engine, but they're connected to hundreds of trade organizations. So what's different about them is that they are very tuned into skilled labor compared to, they don't use LinkedIn, for example. They have, they're connected to a lot of unions. They're connected to a lot of trade associations, and they could be a very interesting way to find skilled labor. And they don't do the candidate outreach, but they will source a sizable amount of candidates based on very specific criteria in a geographic region. So maybe consider it, take a look at it and see if that helps. I do know that they, Carrie, the name of it was This Way Global.
Global. Okay.
Yep.
Thanks, Bill.
And their CEO, Angela, the reason I know about this, I've known her for a while. She also speaks frequently about the power of AI in sourcing. to go after. I'll give you an example of an area that's very tough to source that they're very good at, which is security clearances. Right. So if anyone needs security clearances, they actually are tied into a number of sources that allow you to find people with secret, top secret security clearances. So they've approached it differently than just optimizing the sourcing capability from large resumes databases that we all could have access to. They're going after some unique sourcing of the data, and that's what makes AI work, right? So at the end of the day, it's the data, it's the structured data that drives AI and the ability to have the oncology behind it to do effective matching. So that's what I always look at. You know, HackerRank or HackerScore, I always forget the name of it, has been all over LinkedIn the last day or two because they just launched a thing called Hacker Intelligence, which is an entire process that can take somebody from the sourcing all the way to scheduling their own interview, doing all this great stuff, which is awesome. That to me is a phenomenal use of an AI capability because you've already found the person, but now you can be much more engaging, let them schedule their own time. It's almost like an integration of Calendly and a bunch of other things, which that to me is very cool because that takes that off your table and you can focus more on the sourcing, which is where that's where the focus needs to be. And the sourcing and closing of key applicants that you want to take the job. I would want to be focused there. And as in the past, that's where I've been focused. Where I don't want to be is writing simple emails back, answering questions and scheduling interviews. That, while it needs to happen, it's important tasks aren't mission critical on my task list. So awesome. A HackerRank. Thank you, Ganesh. I appreciate that. That's really interesting. Is cool. The LinkedIn stuff is very interesting. Deirdre, I think that's really powerful. One of the things that I found, I know there's a lot of different sources of it. One of the things I found powerful about LinkedIn is it's a deeper relationship than a lot of other platforms. For example, a job board is only building a relationship when somebody is actively looking for another job. LinkedIn is a deeper relationship because people are using it for a different purpose. So the fact that LinkedIn's putting that AI capability in there, I haven't tested it, but it sounds like a good step forward. When it comes to skills assessment, and so just shifting in my brain a little bit, we've sourced somebody. There's some great, we've talked about that. How are you seeing the increase of skills assessment as something that is a tool-based activity? Meaning, are you looking more at vendors or processes to test people's skills rather than taking what they put on their resume?
We face legal challenges there. Everything has become, is it HR approved? Does legal approve it? What kind of bias or is skills testing providing? And I hate it because you have to, you don't apply for a neurosurgeon job and go, yep, just take my resume for it. There has to be some level of skill testing, but I can't figure out to what extent and how to make it safe where someone isn't complaining and then throwing me into 2 months of paperwork justifying why I'm doing what I'm doing.
That's really interesting. Has anyone else have that experience and had found a way to kind of move forward with it?
I could jump in.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was going to say I'm Anthea from the Boston Beer Company. I'm over TA operations here, so process improvements and all those fun things. I forget. I'm sorry, my calendar, my window's right behind me. But yeah, we do skill assessment, especially in IT. What we found is that you can say whatever you want to say in your resume, right? But to prove that you could actually do the work is very different. So we do use CoderPad for our IT team, and we're still looking for other tools that might test different skills than CoderPad has to offer. In my previous organization, I was with a Coca-Cola Consolidated in Charlotte, and we had an analytical team that wanted to always test and assess people's Excel skill set, where you can say, again, I can do macros and VLOOKUPs and et cetera, but then you put someone to the test and they couldn't do it. So we created a test where it was, we tested it with other people in the organization who could show levels that they can achieve versus saying that, you know, one person did something today and tested it out, and then we try something very different the next day. We use the same test over and over again, but we did that one on site because we were afraid that someone would take it and try to share it with other users or other people who might interview. So it's very, you got to be very cautious about what you share out and what you do on site where somebody else is watching you as you do it. One thing, and you know, this is a judgment call, but I've seen with my recruiters that they've said is that they fear that sometimes they're asking someone questions and there's always a pregnant pause that people take when they speak. But now their fear with ChatGPT is that they're using ChatGPT to answer the question and then they're reading the question back. So as much as we can do on camera with a candidate and then using a tool that can't be questionable to your point is something that we take into consideration to avoid the legal issues that might come up or the issues that might pop up on Glassdoor saying that it was an unfair interview.
That is a very new and interesting trend where applicants now, as much as we have AI to make processes easier, they have AI to make answering questions easier. So that
Right.
pregnant pause and things, that's interesting.
We're
That could have
coaching
changed my
people.
whole, yeah,
sorry.
that could have changed my whole college trajectory if we'd had
Yes.
that back then. Yeah. Cum laude would have been achievable. It's so exciting. That's fascinating. So that's interesting about doing it on site and making, and Deirdre, I think you hit on something that's really important. I think there's phenomenal assessment and testing tools that are on the market, but similar to AI, for me, it comes down to data and making sure that they have the validation that they are an effective test for the role you're trying to hire. I think that's certainly important to make sure they have that capability. Very cool. And Carrie, I was just reading your comment here.
I'd like to, so this is Val. I was
go ahead,
gonna,
Val.
go ahead, sorry. I was gonna jump in about something Ellie had mentioned. So I've been a recruiter as part of the Beeline vendor programs for JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo. I've been internal at JP Morgan Chase and now at Wells Fargo. And we use a number of different platforms for that, whether it was Connexa, HackerRank, HireVue, as long as they were administered consistently and they're vetted through compliance and they plug into our ATS and we have documentation that it was administered in a consistent manner. Now, if it's early career campus recruiting versus experienced and professional, the time at which you administer that test might be a little bit different, but how it is assessed, you just have to make sure that you have the documentation and it's pass fail. Somebody that's got the technical acumen that can make that assessment is the one that's making the judgment call on that, and then they progress into the next round. My personal opinion on that is, if you're a technical interviewer, you should still be able to assess that person's capabilities with or without the use of that tool. It's just a data point. It's not the only data point.
Yes, that is a great point.
And sorry, just to follow up on that, right? As we're using these assessment tools, are we seeing sort of a correlation between the levels of roles that it's most effective, right? I mean, management versus executive or however that is, or is it just a different set of tools that we're using for the different sort of scopes of responsibilities?
I can answer that from my own personal experience, because when it was software engineering managers or directors, we usually did not assess them. It was more about their soft skills, people management, other esoteric qualities. Whereas if it was a professional individual contributor, then yeah, they're the ones that are going to have to code and deliver on certain requirements, and they'd have to be assessed as such. My personal experience as well, never found a correlation with someone who had 10 or 20 years of experience versus a new grad or somebody with 2 to 5 years of experience, because that person with 2 to 5 years could, get a really good score, whereas that person who had 10 or 20 years, they might not care. They might have the attitude that, well, this is beneath me, I shouldn't have to do this coding assessment, and they're not going to take it seriously, or they just don't know what they're talking about. So there was never a correlation, in my opinion.
Mhm.
And Val,
Hi,
that's a
Padma.
really,
This is, I'm sorry,
oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. Nope, go for it.
Sorry, everybody. My name is Ebony Walker, and I am a talent acquisition executive with Philadelphia Insurance Companies, and been with the organization for almost 10 years. And ever since I've been here, we've used the assessment called Caliper, which is also known as Talogy now, because they changed their name over. And to Val's point, I absolutely encourage leadership to that this is a data point. This is not the end all to be all. We are not looking at only these scores. In fact, it's not even a pass fail. It's just simply a score and how you interpret it. And a lot of times, what we will do, in fact, all of the time, what we will do is we will recommend that leaders speak with the associates from the assessing organization and allow them to get a better idea and better clarity around the results of that individual, as opposed to what they always do, which back in the day, it was they would skip all the way through everything else to get to that last page, right? And now they are not getting to the last page, it's now on the first page. And so they look at the first page and they won't look at anything else. So there are so many different things that I think goes into how to utilize these assessments to best assess not only the person that is coming in, but also how can we use this tool for further future development once they are here? Because the reality is this: I've seen people who scored really low and do extremely well. And I've seen people who have scored off the charts do poorly. I mean, really, really bad. So is there a science? Yeah, they'll tell us that, right? They'll tell us that there's a science. But the reality is that sometimes, especially with these skills-based tests that are more attributed to your personality, sometimes people will take breaks in between taking that assessment. So the way that my mind works and my brain operates at 9 o'clock in the morning, when I've had my coffee, when I've got the kids off to school, is very different how my brain would operate at 6:30 at night. I done had a hell of a day. You know, the kids are getting on my nerves. Homework has to be done, but I got to get back to this assessment. My mindset is in two different places. So therefore, it's more than likely going to answer those questions very differently. And so the encouragement or the solution that I always try to provide is, when you're taking the assessment, although it's not timed, take it in one sitting. So that way you're not coming back, you're not coming back and going. And that will, and I have seen that it impacts the scores. So yes, I think direct challenge is trying to find a balance between leaders who live and die by it, and a balance between the leaders that are like, yes, the scores look good, but look at all of these other attributes.
No, that's
That
a
is,
great point. That's really a great point, Ebony, because part of it that we've seen in the past, some of the challenges, right, is assessments tied to the culture and the values of the organization, because they really kind of do test out for technical skills, right, or team management, however we want to kind of put the scope of those tests into. But I think tying that into the culture and the values is the hard piece, right? Because that does take a little bit more doing that, typically the TA team is always kind of balancing out. So it's interesting, but thank you. Thanks for sharing.
For sure, absolutely.
Ebony, I
I don't know
love what you just said there. Sorry. Ebony, I love what you just said there, back to that whole challenge of the using skill testing. I'd say trying to keep it valid and trying to keep it equal has been hard, because we are applying different skill set test assessments to different roles within the industry, right? I'm looking for soft skills, because I think no matter how educated you are in where I'm working, soft skills culture trumps, your level of education. We're managing people, right? But then I'm
Sure.
also looking at, okay, I'm going to take a project controls person, and I really want to know whether they are as good as they say on those Excel skills, right? They've put it down on their resume that they're proficient, a master, So it's the finding that balance, the consistency of the technical element and the people skills element.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just going to add in, so hi, I'm Paula. I'm the Director of Talent Acquisition at a company called Inlight. We're headquartered out of San Diego, but have people nationwide at least. So we used SHL extensively. We used to use it for every job. And during the pandemic and then subsequent acquisitions and the Great Resignation, there just became a lot of questioning about why we were, adding this as another, hoop to our process. We did some major acquisitions, and the cost became pretty prohibitive at that point to ask every one of our candidates to do it. So we scaled back, and we're really using a very skills-based one right now. It's like a computer/writing assessment that we're using now, specifically for one of our biggest job groups. And that seems to be going okay. The managers definitely don't want to give it up. But I can't say we make a ton of hiring decisions on it. But I do think it informs interviews, which I think is good. But one of the reasons why I was okay giving it up is we started to really look at scores and tenure and performance. And to be honest, we couldn't really find a ton of correlation. So as we had been using SHL for like a decade, right? So we had tons of data. And yeah, we had some, they were chunked into thirds, right? Lower third, middle third, upper third. And the people who scored really, really high actually didn't do so well in our organization, and actually had a higher involuntary term rate than others. The middle of the road was middle of the road. There just wasn't a trend line at all. And so it was one of those things where I was like, for how big of an organization we are right now, do we really want to be spending almost $200,000 a year on, and adding this chunk into our process and candidate exhaustion and all of these different things to not necessarily be predicting success in the job. So we nixed it, but it's been interesting because as of recent, as candidate flow has flourished, I'm getting a lot of requests from hiring managers being like, where's that assessment? Didn't we used to test people? Why can't I get that score I used to get? So it'll be interesting to see if, depending on how the job market goes and what that continues to look like, whether or not I'll get, sort of push to bring that back in.
And that's really interesting, Paula, because, based on what you said, there's, there can be exposure, right? Because it's not really tied to what is, you're seeing in the actual job itself. And so if there's a disparate impact in terms of those scores on any particular protected class, then, but I hear the hiring managers, because they get overwhelmed with having so many candidates that they have to sift through. One of the things we're doing now is we are putting position-specific screening questions into our process, to try to kind of, further filter out the candidates and help the hiring managers make some decisions, because it's a lot.
Yeah, we've been using in our ATS, we can build in screening questions, and we've actually been using those a lot more and filtering a lot more candidates into the DNQ bin, just because we have a lot of positions that require very specific licensure or certifications or those sorts of things. We're more of a clinical medically based organization. So yeah, we've been doing a lot of that. That's one of our bigger projects for this coming year, is to make that more standard across all of our jobs. So,
do you do any of that for not just the DNQ, but for prioritizing the candidate? So we're doing it now where even we have the screening questions for the nice but not necessary. Mm-hmm. So that way, if we get a bunch of them, we can go and just get that subset that are really kind of like the Goldilocks. Mm-hmm. And that I think is defensible for us in terms of, when we have to do our AA reports on why we're only moving them.
That's another one of the many projects this year. So we use iCIMS, and we actually went ahead, we just renewed our big contract with them, and included their AI tool. And we've been testing it, and it's maybe not as far along as I would have hoped
No,
in
it's
terms
not.
of staff ranking candidates. And so we're actually struggling with how to create the new sort of guideline for our process for our affirmative action plans. We had just moved to we get overwhelmed with candidates for some of our jobs, and then some of our jobs get none, which I'm sure is quite common. And so we were really focused on the ones that get hundreds of candidates sort of overnight. And so we were trying to come up with like, what's the best way we can say that we review candidates consistently. And so we actually just went with time-based, like we review people in the process in which they apply, or the application stamp, date and time stamp, basically. But now that we're using questions more and we have the AI tool, it's kind of like, well, shouldn't we be looking at these tier 1 candidates versus tier 2 versus tier 3? But the rankings aren't as good as I thought they would be. So I can't do that. And it's a moving target. So every time someone applies, it changes the rankings.
Yes.
And so I was like, oh no. So yeah, we're actually still struggling a little bit with how to incorporate the AI sorting tools into our affirmative action guidelines and processes.
Yeah, we're not using that at all.
It's just in like our test date. It's in our
Yeah.
test. We haven't rolled it out. Our hiring managers doesn't know it exists. Our talent acquisition partners are playing with it. We're doing some testing on requisitions to see how well it's coming out and those sorts of things. And then it's also obviously it all depends on how good your job description is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then
Yeah.
we all go back to that just basic thing, which hopefully AI is helping us with. Our comp team is revamping the entire job description and the template and everything they're using. So I'm hoping that I will start to get the results of their efforts soon, so that we can do another full revamp of our job postings, because they're not as beautiful as I would love them to be.
Yeah, that is an interesting, and that is an area that a lot of organizations are stepping into, is helping rewrite those job descriptions and leveraging a lot of data. One of the companies that I didn't know had started going down that path, maybe by their name and because I knew them a while ago, was salary.com. Yeah, they look at a couple 100,000 job descriptions a week, and they have a new capability that you can put your job description in. It'll update it with best in class practices, tell you what the pay rate is, which I mean, the reason I was talking to him was like, hey, if we hire remote people, let's say I'm a Manhattan-based company, I'm paying that pay rate for an X city. And now I'm hiring a remote person who lives in Providence, Rhode Island. What do I pay them? And so they can give you a lot of data on that, which I thought was really interesting. But I had no idea that they had become such a foundation of structured data to drive AI and to do updates on things such as job descriptions and stuff like that. And Dean, that's great. I have seen what BrightHire is doing. Dean just mentioned in chat that BrightHire is another company that's doing that. And I do believe from what I've seen, they do a great job at it as well.
So just as I guess a plug for ISIM, since I just slammed them on their AI tool, their Copilot tool is actually quite good. So now when you create a job description, you can go to Copilot and it'll give you a very similar kind of, hey, try doing this. You can ask it to, make it a more junior position, shorten it. I mean, just like using sort of ChatGPT. But I've actually been more impressed with there's an interview. If you use their interview scheduling tool, there's that little you have to use the tool, but then it'll present interview questions, and I've actually been pretty gosh darn impressed with the interview questions that it's coming up with. So, and it wasn't anything that you had to buy, you just have to turn it on. You have to use the interview scheduling tool. I think that's kind of the key. But if you use that, the interview questions have been actually quite good.
It's great to
That's
know.
awesome.
Awesome. So we have 7 minutes left, and I just question, has there been a need with the full hiring team, right? So we have a hiring manager, we have different people. have you had to do a lot of retraining as you're going down these technology role paths? Has it required you to really think about and train or educate all the different aspects of the people who come in contact with the process, how to do things differently? Like the skills assessment is one that just sticks out of my brain, is really sitting down with a hiring manager and say, look, this is not the end all be all. This is a data point in a series of data points to make an informed decision, but it should not drive the decision. It should be an influencer rather than a final decision point. And I'm just curious how you guys are approaching that.
You sort of asked two questions. I'll answer the first one.
Okay.
I
Sorry.
think one of my biggest challenges for this upcoming year, and has continued, I mean, it just kind of keeps rearing its head, is just tool utilization. I've tried to be proactive, and we've built up our AI tools and iCIMS, and they've got their LinkedIn recruiter stuff, and Indeed has actually, their new AI tool has actually been, I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from recruiters on that. We're using MetaView now for interviews. I mean, so it feels like I'm kind of constantly throwing tools at them. Getting them to use them has actually probably been our biggest challenge. Even the text recruit, it's just, I don't know if it's too overwhelming, or I'm not doing it in a simplified enough manner, but it's been a little bit of not a carrot, but a stick. And then once they start using it, then I'm getting great feedback, like, oh, I just did this. Oh, this is so helpful. Oh, my manager loved this. We're getting feedback, like interview notes are beautiful. I'm like, of course it is. It's because we're finally using a tool to do it, right? And they're coming out consistently, and we're using templates, so it's consistent across recruiters and those sorts of things. But man, it's been more difficult than I would have imagined to get my recruiters to accept these tools and integrate them into their day-to-day. And I don't know if it's just my team or whatever, but I've been surprised at how much harder that's been.
It is not just your team, it's all of our teams.
Paula, can I respond to that?
Yeah.
So I'm coming from a psychology background, an industrial psychology background. And if you look at life cycles of teams and life cycles of learning, you look at things like the first life cycle is orientation, the second is conflict or problem solving, and the third one is harmony. So if you've just introduced all of these different elements, you've got to think that your team is right now sitting in the first two stages of all these different levels.
We're dipping our toe into harmony. We're getting there.
Right.
It's just,
right.
It was just
so
a little bit harder
it's
than
a
I would have
matter of
expected.
that time before you get to harmony for all of those tools that you've introduced.
Yeah, and I think so. Just on the consistency part, that's been we've been with iCIMS for years, so we've really customized our iCIMS interaction. So we have a built-out intake tab, so all of the intake questions should be pretty gosh darn consistent. We have a consistency in our job description template, and then with interviews, MetaView, and I don't know, you could probably just even use something, all of these new record your conversations and summarize them tools, right, is coming through. But MetaView sort of specifically was developed for interviews, and you can build templates in it. And that's been really helpful. So we've kind of said to ourselves, like, in any phone screen, what should a hiring manager get out of it? And so we have some bigger buckets around, motivation, interest in the company, those bigger buckets, compensation, that kind of stuff. And then you could put in the types of questions that would lead to the input that would go into those. And so you can build as many templates as you want, as specific as you want for different positions. And so every phone screen basically comes out with the same 6 categories. And then the information in those categories are obviously unique to the person who you're interviewing. So that's been very, very helpful. I don't think my team is utilizing the AI portion of it yet. I mean, they're getting the summary and they're making edits, but you can actually say, you can prompt it and say, add more details about their experience at the university. in this section, and it'll beef it up. But it's pretty cool. You can make it longer, shorter, bullet point, paragraph form, all those sorts of things. So, and I actually, I have a hard stop in a minute, so
Well, yeah,
I'm
so
gonna
I
jump
try, and
off so I can go to that one.
awesome. Well, thank you. And thank everybody. Thank you everyone for coming. It's been a great discussion. It's really interesting to me in terms of how we're thinking and bringing, I mean, AI in particular fascinates me in terms of what the use cases are and how we find out, how we work to make it effective. Because AI unto itself is just a tool. It's the data that makes it into a solution in my view of it. So hopefully this was helpful for everyone who attended. I'm really excited next week to talk more about the neurodiversity. I hope I can see you there. And thanks again for coming. And I hope everyone has a great day and no tornadoes and more flamingos. So we'll talk to you all later.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.